History holds a secret more chilling than any fiction. The story of a royal family that murdered their own children. This is not a legend, but a dark reality for one of the world's most powerful dynasties. By the end of this, you will understand the terrible logic that made parents see their sons as threats. We will uncover the gilded cages where princes lived in constant fear, and explore the moment a sultan ordered the death of 19 of his brothers in a single night. What does it truly cost to sit on a throne? The tragic story of the Romanov children in the early 20th century stands as a stark, more recent reminder of this grim reality. Their fate, sealed in a basement, echoes a practice that is ancient and chillingly pragmatic. Long before that terrible night, the ruling classes of the ancient world were already well versed in this darkest of arts. In the sun-baked courts of Ptolemaic Egypt, rumors swirled around the dynasty founded by one of Alexander the Great's generals. It was a family known for its intricate and often deadly internal politics, where marriage between siblings was common to keep power concentrated. Within this incestuous bubble, the line between family member and political rival was dangerously thin. The potential for a child, even one's own, to become a focal point for rebellion meant that infanticide was whispered about as a terrible, if unconfirmed, tool of statecraft. Across the Mediterranean, the early Roman Empire provides clearer, more documented examples. The first emperor, Augustus, saw his own family line plagued by suspicion and premature death. His potential heirs, like his grandsons Gaius and Lucius, died young under circumstances that historians still debate, while other relatives were exiled or executed for perceived disloyalty. The motive was always the same, a cold and calculating logic that transcended individual cruelty. For a ruler, a child is not just a successor, but a potential rival. A popular son could attract his own followers, creating a faction that might challenge the current sovereign. A son from a different mother could represent a competing branch of the family, a magnet for every disgruntled noble seeking to advance their own position. The very existence of multiple heirs could shatter the fragile unity of an empire, plunging it into civil war upon the monarch's death. So, the unthinkable became thinkable. Murdering one's children was reframed not as a personal atrocity, but as a political necessity, a brutal sacrifice made for the perceived stability of the entire realm. This was the toxic inheritance passed down through the centuries, a dreadful precedent that would find its most systematic and chilling application in the halls of a different empire altogether. This dreadful precedent found its ultimate expression in the sprawling palaces of the Ottoman Empire. For over 600 years, the House of Osman ruled a dominion that stretched across 3 continents, commanding unimaginable wealth and military might. From their magnificent capital in Istanbul, the sultans presided over a glittering court, a center of art, science, and power that was the envy of the world. Yet within this gilded civilization festered a uniquely brutal custom, a law written not just in ink, but in blood. To prevent the empire from fracturing upon a sultan's death, the Ottomans codified a terrifying solution, the Law of Fratricide. This was not a secret plot or a whispered rumor, but an official legal decree. It stated plainly that upon a sultan's ascension, he had the right, and indeed the duty, to execute his brothers. The logic was cold and simple. A single reigning son eliminated all rival claimants, thereby securing a smooth transition and averting a devastating civil war. The state's stability was therefore purchased with the lives of its royal children. This systemic framework transformed family members into permanent threats, setting the stage for the specific, heartbreaking tragedies that would echo through the palace corridors. The law created a world where a prince's greatest misfortune was not being the firstborn son, but simply being born at all. For a prince of the Ottoman Empire, a palace could be a prison. From the moment a boy was recognized as a şehzade, his life was no longer his own. He was removed from the wider world and placed into a system known as the kafes, a word meaning the cage. This was not a dungeon of chains and straw, but a gilded apartment deep within the sprawling complex of Topkapi Palace. He was surrounded by luxury, attended by servants, and educated in courtly arts, yet he was never allowed to leave. The doors were guarded, his every movement watched. The stated purpose was protection, but the true goal was control. By isolating the princes, the state neutralized them as political threats. They could not gather armies, form alliances with powerful governors, or become figureheads for rebellion. The empire was spared the wars of succession that plagued other realms, but this stability came at a terrible human cost. Imagine the psychological toll on a young man raised in such an environment. He knew his existence was a problem to be managed. He knew that his own father, the Sultan, saw him as a potential rival. He lived with the constant, gnawing fear that any display of ambition, any sign of competence, could be misinterpreted as treason and lead to a silent execution. The cage produced rulers who were often deeply unprepared for the world outside. They spent their formative years in a state of suspended animation, surrounded by intrigue but shielded from real governance. When one of these confined princes finally ascended the throne, he could be paranoid, indecisive, or completely detached from the realities of ruling a vast empire. The system designed to create stable successions often resulted in profoundly unstable leaders. But the most extreme outcome of this logic was not just lifelong confinement. It was the final, sanctioned murder of the very princes the cage was built to hold. Upon the death of a sultan, the new ruler's first official act was often the grim silencing of his brothers. The most infamous example occurred in the year 1595, when Sultan Mehmed III took power. To secure his throne with absolute certainty, he ordered the execution of all 19 of his brothers. The method was often strangulation with a silk cord, a practice considered a merciful death for royalty, sparing royal blood from being visibly spilled. The justification from the court jurists and grand viziers was always the same: the preservation of the state. The lives of a few individuals were a price they were willing to pay to prevent a civil war that could cost thousands of lives and shatter the empire itself. This was the chilling paradox of the Ottoman system, a civilization that built breathtaking mosques and advanced sciences while also maintaining a legal framework for royal fratricide. The cage was therefore the physical manifestation of this dreadful choice, a place where princes were kept alive until the moment the state decided they must die. Yet the ultimate perversion of this system came when the violence turned not just on brothers, but on a sultan's own sons. This was filicide, a step beyond fratricide, where a father was compelled to see his children as existential threats. Consider the case of Sultan Selim I, a ruler so fierce he was known as Selim the Grim. He had fought his own brothers to claim the throne, and he was determined to pass a stable, unified empire to his chosen heir, his son Suleiman. But he had other sons, Şehzade Ahmet and Şehzade Korkut, who were grown men with ambitions and supporters of their own. When Ahmet, the elder, began to act rebelliously, gathering troops and challenging his father's authority, Selim faced a terrible choice. The political calculus was brutally clear. A living, rebellious prince was a spark that could ignite a civil war, tearing the empire apart. To secure the future for Suleiman, who would become Suleiman the Magnificent, Selim ordered the executions of both Ahmet and Korkut. He sacrificed his own sons for the cold ideal of imperial stability. The psychological toll of such an act is almost impossible to comprehend. How does a father reconcile himself to signing the death warrant for his child? Court chroniclers wrote of Selim's grim demeanor deepening, his poetry taking on a new shade of sorrow. He was a man who had done the unthinkable, not out of personal cruelty, but because the system he ruled demanded it. These decisions were rarely made in isolation. They were often the product of intense pressure from powerful figures surrounding the Sultan. The Valide Sultan, the Queen Mother, held immense influence. Her primary goal was to see her own son on the throne and her own line continue. She might advocate for the elimination of a rival grandson from a different mother to secure her own family's dominance. Meanwhile, the Grand Vizier, the empire's chief minister, and other high officials were constantly maneuvering for power. They knew their futures depended on being allied with the winning prince. It was not uncommon for these advisors to exaggerate a prince's rebellious intentions or even fabricate evidence of treason, pushing the Sultan toward a decision he might otherwise resist. The royal household became a deadly arena where family members were pitted against each other in a silent, brutal contest for survival. What kind of world have we entered where a grandmother might whisper for a grandson's death, or a father's chief minister could advise him to kill his own child? This was the grim reality of absolute power, a world where love was so often the first casualty. The legacy of the Ottoman succession system is a brutal paradox written in silk cords and gilded cages. The Law of Fratricide and the grim existence of the caifs were designed to eliminate rivals and ensure a smooth transition of power, yet they consistently produced the very instability they sought to prevent. Rulers raised in paranoid isolation, or who began their reigns by slaughtering their brothers, were often ill-equipped to govern. They could be distrustful, withdrawn, or manipulated by the court factions around them. This systemic paranoia, this constant sacrifice of the most promising young minds of the dynasty, slowly drained the empire of its vitality over centuries, becoming a significant factor in its long and protracted decline. The ultimate tragedy is that a system built to preserve power ultimately corrupted it from within. It reveals a profound and unsettling truth, that the pursuit of absolute control can force a parent to see a child as a threat and a brother as a target. The real cost of the throne was not measured in gold or land, but in the broken bonds of family and the countless lives cut short by dynastic ambition. What other historical mysteries haunt your thoughts? Share in the comments which forgotten story or enigmatic figure you would like us to uncover next. And for more deep dives into history's darkest secrets, be sure to subscribe.